And then there was the issue of trucks on our road, which accelerates the deterioration of our roads. We felt like they ought to pay a fee, an additional fee, based on the weight of these massive trucks to use the roads over and above what a normal car would make. So these trucks now pay an additional fee on a yearly basis for usage. There's some other pieces in the legislation. Most of us could swallow basically what was being done, and there goes some of our commerce down the river now. But most of us could settle with what was there, and I was very happy, quite honestly, that we did the work that we did right on up until the last day, until we had to make the vote. And then I had to make a decision along with everybody else. Well, do we scrap everything or do we do this? And then we try to fix this stuff either through executive order from the governor, and I sent a letter to the governor asking him to exempt any of these rooms that were booked before July 1st. That basically fell on deaf ears, and it was probably difficult at that point because they already had the revenue numbers generated to plug into the budget. And we also sent that to the revenue commissioner, which is a good friend of mine. And of course, all of you now know the rules and regs that have come out that you have to abide by to run this stuff. But you've only got to live with it, I hope, for a short period of time, because what I'd like to see personally is the fee be cut minimal in half, something that we can live with, and then everybody can participate and be part of the solution. 20% of the entire fee shouldn't come on the backs of, and make you less competitive. What I'd like to see, and I hope there's not a whole lot of vacation rental by owners here, because that's part of your competitive disadvantage, is as this market, at about 10% right now, continues to grow, it's going to make you even less competitive, because they're not paying the same fees in addition to the $5, the hotel motel tax, and all the other fees that you've got to pay to bring those people into to paying a portion of that. So there should be light at the end of the tunnel. It's going to be an area to get there. I think there's a reception in the governor's office as long as we can get close to the number, but we're going to need your help, and we're going to need your help in a big way.
All right, so we're going to take some questions from the audience, but I've got a couple I'm going to start with to get things rolling. I'm looking, so you're not Alyssa, but you'll do. TJ has a microphone, so if you have a question, raise your hand, but we're going to do a couple quick questions first. Michael, for you, one of the things Chirag talked about was engaging local officials and getting to know them, building a relationship. Can you tell us a little bit about what you guys have done at TLC and how you work with your members to make that happen?
Sure. It's as easy as picking up a phone. It's as easy as sending an email. I think for a lot of people, for instance, when we did the call to action to call the governor's office to ask for a veto on House Bill 170, we simplified it within the narrative of our email. We told our members, it may sound intimidating to call the governor's office. It's not. Simply call this number, tell them who they are, tell them that this is what you would like, get their name, and that's it. So we try to simplify to what many people feel is a very scary process. Government, to a lot of people, is very intimidating, when in fact it's not. In fact, it's just as easy as an email. It's just as easy as a phone call. So not only do we participate in a lot of receptions where our elected officials are present, we go to them, we take our members with us, we call them, we introduce them. As a matter of fact, there's plenty of people that when we're in the room with someone like Ron, who's been fantastically responsive to our industry, we say, Ron, do you know this guy? You need to meet him. And they exchange cards, and it's just as simple. They're all people that represent you, your business, and your interests. And 99.99% of them take that responsibility very, very seriously. One of the things that we find very, very true, with the exception of Ron, is that our elected officials are often incredibly ignorant to what our businesses are, how they work, how they generate income, how they generate money for their own constituency. It's our responsibility, it's your responsibility to stem those tides. It's your responsibility to go and make sure that they understand how our business works. Have any of you ever been audited by a revenue department? And you have to explain to them, no, this is how the taxes are collected. This is a comp, so there was no taxes there. Well, these are professionals that we have to explain this business to. Well, I've got a representative sitting next to me that doesn't represent just tourism, but also represents ports, also represents manufacturing, also represents education, also represents medical. All of them have very powerful lobbyists, correct? All of them have people that they're paying an enormous amount of money to keep him educated on the specific needs of the industry and the topics of concern. We don't. Not good enough, anyway. So we've got to just go ahead and make that jump. It's simply that easy. And it does start on the local level. It starts with your council person or alder person and your mayor, and it flows from there. But the easiest thing to do, pick up the phone, send the email, start the relationship, and particularly because you're attached to an organization that is as large and influential as AAHOA, I promise you they'll pay attention.
Great, thank you. And so Representative Stevens, to dovetail on that, if you could just, what's an effective way to communicate? What do you find to be something that gets your attention?
Emails are okay. For me, it's a phone call is incredibly important. It's just, I give my cell number out. I don't know if you guys have a pen, but it's 912-596-1998. And I'll give that again in a minute once you find your pen. 912-596-1998. And I prefer just a regular phone call because it's always with me. Emails typically, quite honestly, whenever they're in a crisis situation, get lost because there's what's the word that I'm looking for? They're generally the same email over and over and over again that somebody's trying to forward on to me. The most effective way to do it is just by phone call. Or if you're at an organization like this, whenever you come in, just have a conversation. I mean, we're just plain Jane folks.
Great. With that, I think I'll open it up to the floor if there are any questions.
Before we do, one thing I would like to mention is as we have this discussion, we have the opportunity right now, before we start moving into the next legislative session, we have an opportunity as AAHOA members to have a strong and constructive dialogue with our leaders who will help make these changes. And for those of you in the room who've had the opportunity to talk with your leaders, and particularly thank you to Representative Stevens for being here, they're interested in working with us. And so as we have this discussion, let's make sure that we're looking forward in how we can make this work for us as a community of hoteliers and not necessarily look back and try to re-establish some of the hurt that we felt at that time. So let's, as we're asking these questions, let's keep an eye on for the future and how we can move forward together.
And to ensure that you're completely confused, Alyssa is back to take your questions. So if you have a question.
Representative Stevens, my name is Jay Patel. I live in Pooler. I'm one of the AAHOA board of directors. I represent this region. I've met with several legislators regarding this $5 tax, and some of the information that we collected was that there was two issues. One, they were pressured into this $5 tax. The other was that there was no time for discussion. So as a voter, I find it very disturbing that we didn't follow due process in discussing and debating this issue before voting on it. So do we have a solution? Do you see the same problem?
Very good question. It's for those of you that didn't get it, it's about this basically the due process. This was never brought up. Yeah, and I got to tell you, when I went to bed that night, and I thank you, Jay. When I went to bed the night before the vote, we all, including the petroleum industry, which has a very powerful lobby, the auto industry, and others, were under the assumption that this fee was going to come out of the rental cars. And the logic behind that is, and in somebody's mind, is that the rental cars typically are those people that are picking them up from the airport, and they're somebody from out of town. Everybody likes to tax somebody else behind the tree, something like that. And but we didn't know until the morning of what the fee was added in there on this conference committee. And the governor has already given us a warning that we're going to be coming back if we couldn't get the number we were looking for. Due process, in my mind, what needed to happen is right on up until the very last day, because you never know, it's in a defensive posture most of the time, to make sure that you had a voice at the table, a strong voice, a collective voice. And I must tell you that over a period of years, it's been rather fractious. So a collective voice that this would never have happened, in my mind, in my view, that if we'd had an extreme one voice speaking for the entire industry. And sometimes, but thank you, Jay. That's whether it's it didn't go through the process. It's politics, and this is the way that conference committees come about, as they look for a way to get to the number.
Anybody else? Come on, don't be shy.
Yes, my name is Kirit Patel. I'm from Savannah. Why is the hotel owners or hoteliers only penalized instead of others? Instead of increase the over the board state tax, and they choose to pay the $5 per night for every single night stay. That is unfair to the hotelier. Because other businesses, rather than we are paying a 7% on state of Georgia, either they can increase by 9% or 10%. Instead of putting $5 on the board, this is not only first night stay, but if somebody is staying 4 or 5 nights, they still have to pay $5 each night. That will going to be biggest hurts on state of Georgia hoteliers on their ADRs and occupancy. So what the ADRs and occupancy is there, it's of course they're gonna lose big time on their ADRs and occupancy. Thank you.
Let me start by the first part of your statement. You're absolutely right when you say there's frustration because of what we found out in terms of the $5 flat against hotels. But if I can reiterate what Representative Stevens was saying, the overall law that was ultimately signed was nearly $900 million. And of that, $200 million came from hotels. So they did go after other groups and other businesses like trucking and Delta Airlines and a few others as well. And I think the representative mentioned a few. We don't necessarily have to list all of them. Hotels were targeted for a significant portion of it, is absolutely true. But it wasn't as though the law was written saying we're going to tax hotels and that was the entire law. It was the entire thing was put in as a portion of it. Does that make it right? Does that excuse it? Absolutely not. But what it was a broader plan that was intended for the entire state and for transportation purposes. So your concern is absolutely right, but there were other industries that were targeted and have increased in their taxes and fees as well, including the gas tax, as the representative mentioned. Now, as far as your concern about the $5 hitting across the board, anytime somebody comes in, it happens every single night. And that is absolutely true. One of the things as an association and as a coalition of industries we're working on is having a dialogue with representatives from throughout the state. And we've already met with, I'd say, somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 65 legislators just to talk about this issue over the last couple of months. To understand what their concerns were and seek opportunities to see how they would change the law in order to make it less hurtful for hoteliers across the state. And as Michael will probably indicate as well, it's not just hotels that are hurting. It is everybody across the board that is involved in travel and in tourism, whether it's hotels or restaurants or other industries, retail establishments across the state. And that's why it's a significant issue. And so we've engaged as AAHOA on behalf of the hoteliers in Georgia. We've engaged with a lobbying firm, one of the foremost in the state, known as the Hudson Group, a gentleman by the name of Brian Hudson, along with his partner, Ronnie Chance, who is the former majority leader in the Georgia Senate. And you all know AAHOA's CEO is Chip Rogers, former majority leader in the Senate there too. So we understand that this happened, but we've taken steps to see how there may be opportunities to change it in the next legislative session. So we're looking forward to an opportunity to have that dialogue as well. I don't know if either of you all would like to chat as well.
Yeah, I'll hit one of the questions you asked, just square on the head. Why us? Because they thought one, they thought they could get away with it. No offense. Two, I think the big thing is and this is the rhetoric of politics, right? First of all, they're calling it a fee and not a tax, and we all know it's a tax. They call it a fee because then they can say that they didn't increase taxes. Okay. Number three, because of a lack of education, which again I think everybody in the industry or leading the industry is taking responsibility for, they thought that this is something that would be passed on to someone who's not a Georgia voter. They simply thought that if we're putting this onus onto hoteliers, that you, Mr. Hotel A, and me, Mr. Hotel B, my customers come from South Carolina, from Florida, from Tennessee, from Kentucky, and they don't vote for me. Well, the problem is that the fact of the matter is Georgia's #1 customer for hospitality and lodging is Georgia. So in fact, it was a massive tax increase on Georgians themselves, but they really thought that what it was is passing the buck to someone who comes from out of town, who may or may not come back, but they certainly don't vote.
And I'll follow up with one more. Thank you for the question, by the way. Probably the people that it hurts the worst are people like Jay from Pooler and other locations that are very close to the border of other states. And whenever you're on the lower end and you're trying to compete, it becomes a very, very big issue. But it's fixable.
Who's next? Oh, there we go.
Hi, my name is Deepak Patel. I'm here in Savannah as well, in the hotel business. Chirag mentioned that we have to change this and we have to work on it. I understand to change the law, you have to introduce a bill, and for that bill, you will require a sponsor. My question for representative, would you sponsor a bill and have a group of your colleagues join with you to change this bill, and when it will happen?
We're drawing it up as we speak. And of course, you know, making a law, especially whenever it starts out, it's like making hamburger. You know, it starts out as one thing and winds up as something else. But I believe, and of course the people with the revenue and even the governor's office is going to be looking for that number. But I'm looking for a $2 to $2.50 flat fee across the board. We're going to get major pushback if we do a percentage from those on the upper end. But for a $2 fee, then we've got to look to fill the gap somewhere else. And that's where a lot of the debate's going to come. I don't think we're going to get pushback at all. And you know, the irony of the whole thing, if we had passed the sports marketing bill, especially for our area down in Savannah, and we had the opportunity to use tax dollars to incentivize and allow these, especially smaller cities, to go out and get venues, the sting would not have been so bad because you would have been full all the time. But there's something wrong with putting the majority of the onus on those people on the lower end, Jay and others, that especially to our state. Yeah, I'm going to be the goat that goes after it.
Do you have many others representatives who will support this bill?
We've spoken with a lot of folks in leadership and who are leading across the state. They understand, first and foremost, that it's hit hoteliers hard, and they are willing to work with us, which is already a step beyond where we were ever in the past. And, you know, to go back to the earlier question, why us? It's because we never had a voice. And it wasn't because we were somehow not listened to. It's because we never spoke up. So now it's important. And I know you were there, and I know there are a lot of faces around here that we've been around. We've had conversations. This is a great example of it. But we can't stop here. Because at the end of the day, when Representative Stevens is looking to craft a bill, or when some of these other legislators from around the state are looking to participate, they're going to say, all right, hotels, who do I know that this is going to affect? I have to pick up the phone and call somebody. And we want that person to be you all. And they say, all right, well, I'm going to call Deepak Bhai, I'm going to call Dean, and I'm going to say, all right, there's this bill in front of me, what do you think of it? When we get to that point, then we know we've achieved something. And that's why its responsibility is in this room, that we start making those calls to our legislators early on, starting today, starting tomorrow. Say, hey, I'm here, I'm an employer in your district, I own a hotel, or I own a few of these hotels, I'd like to talk with you about this legislation. Then we're going to start being on the other end of that call.
So I have a quick question.
Yeah, no,
Go ahead.
So one more thing, and I'm absolutely, I want to add to that. There's a lot of people in the room don't assume what so many do, and it's called groupthink. Well, there were a lot of people that heard it, so everybody else will do it. There'll be plenty. You know, there's 75 people here, 60 will certainly do it, so I don't need to. Yes, no, you have to. Every single person has to. You've got to take that on yourself, along with the organizations. Organizations are only strong because of its members and their actions. So I think it's been too long in our industry, and I grew up in the industry. I've been in the hotel business or the restaurant business my entire life. For too long have we thought, well, if we keep our heads down, they'll never bother us. Well, this is exactly what happens when we have that mentality, and when we have the mentality that someone else is going to take care of it. We're it. And we're the most vested parts of our business because we're the ones that take the profit, and we're also the ones that take the loss. So we've all got to act individually and collectively.
So I have one quick question, and then I'll let Alyssa jump out again. Representative Stevens, thank you for having the courage to carry the bill, but once that bill is dropped, how can our members best help you?
By far, what you did as soon as you found out what we had done to you is you need to stay just as mad all the way through the process, and you need to at least be as enthusiastic, and you need to pick up the phone. You've got a lot of friends there, Brandon Beach, over in the Senate. I mean, everybody understands your issue, but you're going to have to pick up the phone, and you're going to have to make that call to your legislator in your district. Trust me, they listen. They're going into an election year. All of us are. Everybody but the governor. And so picking up the phone and making the same number of phone calls that you made before, not only to us, but also to the governor's office as well, to find a solution so that the majority of the problem is not laid at on your plate.
I have one question for the audience here. How many of you received an email from AAHOA with information with a sign that says, call the governor? And it's got a phone number on that. How many of you guys got that? I should see a lot more hands. All right. Now, how many of you have looked at the sign, encouraged your guests to take a look at that sign, and called the number on that sign? All right. Next time we come here, I want to make sure that every hand is raised, because that is the most specific way that you can do it. Just as Representative Stevens was saying, was make that phone call. It's got the number right on it. We're going to send it out again as soon as this meeting's over. But that's how you all can get involved instantaneously, is by calling that number and making sure your voice is heard right away.
All the way in back. Oh, wait. Jay, can we go to one who hasn't asked, then we'll come back to you? All the way in back. Hang on, the microphone's coming. Hang on. Hang on. Two more. No.
If the $5 is a fee, is that going to be taxed?
No.
No, it is a fee. That's not my call, by the way. That's not taxable. The fee is not taxable. It should not be a part of your equation for room and tax or any other ancillary fee that your municipality charges.
And then, Alyssa. Go ahead, Jay, and then we'll get the microphone.
Representative Stevens, as a Georgia resident, and I think myself and others in this room and outside this room have a concern the way this was passed. And going back to the due process, if we look at Robert's rule, if it applies here, right, when you have a motion in place or a bill in place, you have to have adequate debating, right, or discussion. Right? So this way, people can look at other people's views and maybe come up with a solution and maybe present facts. And to a point where 80% of the people that stay in the hotel industry, in the hotels in Georgia, are out of state. Where did that number come from, and has it been verified? And can we change the process somehow through all this? Because I hate to think down the road we introduce legislation without the adequate debating.
Good point. Rules are suspended. But this is the way that whenever people can't cut, and keep in mind, this number was, we even had a majority leader who was a very good friend of mine that quit over this, strictly over this issue. And it's very contentious about essentially how are you going to get to that number. And there's only so much, we dedicated the extra sales tax that used to go into the general fund that we took out of fuel, we put that into the transportation bill. Everything was all to get to that number. But again, and everything is debated very, very heavily, and it changed. You know, if you recall, I think it even made the press. In a lot of the debate from the House side, there were people that said that with the massive amount of weight coming from containers, that we ought to tax containers. Well, that's the fastest way I know for those 300,000 jobs to start moving to Charleston and other places, because it makes us not very competitive. So we nixed that right away and we put it on trucks, which is essentially where most of the destruction of these come. But that's the way the process works whenever you can't come to a full agreement. The way that it works is if the Senate will do their due diligence, and it's a totally different scenario, or their bill that came back to us was different than what we passed in the House, fully debated. But at the last moment, and of course it comes down to a threat from the governor where, you know, you guys don't come up with this number to get us to where we've got to be, at least in keeping things relative at the last minute, but that's the process. And at the last hour of the 3 members from the House that were appointed and the 3 members from the Senate, this is where this came from, and that's the way the process works. Otherwise, nothing, and conference committees on the last 2 days, and that's when we see those, is sometimes totally different than the way they start out. Let me give you one example. Senator Jackson, who's here from Savannah, for those of you in the hotel industry, you might remember a while back he had a bill that was going to come in and regulate all of your pools. And he was going to put some fees on it and some other things. Well, my good friend from Tybee, whose last name happens to be a day, didn't like that idea and didn't think you guys ought to be that much more regulated. So by the time it went to the Senate and came back, that swimming pool bill turned into a septic tank bill. So that's kind of the way things work up there, is it's a process. But this process, now that we know where we need to be, we just got to lessen the impact on the industry and see how we fix it. But it is the process.
Great. We have time for one more question.
After collecting $200 million, will they stop collecting? And is there any reward for the hoteliers? Will they stop?
Yeah, so the question is,
Collecting
after they've hit 200 million, will they stop collecting the fee? There is a sunset, I'll let you speak about it.
There is a cap sunset, so to speak, so yes.
Here I can. The bill stipulates that as long as the money is being collected and that money is being used on transportation spending, then the revenue can continue. However, when that money collected, not just for our fee, but for all of this revenue bill, when that money is no longer absorbed by transportation, the sunset occurs and the bill is stopped. So it is sort of a sunset, but not a hard date. It's based on the spending of that revenue.
All right, well, let's thank Representative Stevens, Mr. Owens. Can you guys stay for a couple minutes if anybody has a question? Okay, they'll be here for you to ask a question. We've got to change up the stage.
I have no idea.
You know what?
It's supposed to be an annual number. We'll see. No one knows. So,
But that is another avenue that gives us an opportunity for discussion as we are meeting with our representatives next. And to be honest with you, when I'm in your shoes, I would strongly suggest that's one of the questions that you should ask your local representatives as well when you sit down with them face to face.
And my cell number again is 912-596-1998.
all right, let's thank Representative Stevens and Mr. Owens and Shrock for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it. This is good. Sincerely appreciate it. Thank you very much. This was great.
Thanks, sir.